Hey there everyone, and welcome to another video on Near Monsters. In this video we're going to look at the top 5 Earth, Fire and Holy legendaries. I've already done top 10s for legendaries in PvE and PvP. This video I'm basically using it as a time to look at some of the lower tier monsters. So you'll see here on the S+, S and S- categories, I've only talked about the S+ monsters. I really want to delve into some of those monsters that are really powerful, but just didn't make the lists in the other ones. They didn't go as an honourable mentions, but they're definitely very viable, very useful. I'd love to talk about every monster in the game that are like in the lower tiers, because lots of them are good in the right situations, but obviously I have other videos for those. We're just looking at the top 5 here. So for the reason that I'm wanting to talk about those other monsters rather than the ones which I've already covered in the last two videos on legendaries, I'm mainly going to skip over those monsters that are the more powerful ones. I'll briefly mention them as we show them, but if you want to see more about them, you're going to have to check out those other videos, which links to those are in the description. Just one other thing is that this is going to be focusing on PvP more than PvE. So when we're saying the top 5 Earth, we're talking about top 5 Earth for PvP mainly. I've taken PvE into account a little bit, but mostly we're talking PvP. So first off, we're looking at top 5 Earth. So at number 5, I have Oak Thulu. This used to be really good in the old days, and it's kind of fallen out of favour, but it's still very strong. This is one of the tankier auto-poison monsters. Because it has hold ground, it has lowish defense, but because it's low speed, the health is okay. So it tanks reasonably well, and it can keep healing. So if they have to kind of focus on it and actually pressure it a little bit in order to kill it off. So the auto poison we know is great. It's really good for countering shields, hold ground, just making your team more aggressive. Some of those monsters which don't have piercing on their moves, but they have like a fast sweeping move, with auto poison that becomes really deadly. So the auto poison with tanking is good, and then otherwise it can really disrupt the enemy team. It's got the double repulse that can mess up a lot of things, but the really powerful thing is the secret skill. When this first gets a turn even, it can stun all enemies by 150 seconds. If you've had like some poison beforehand to poison enough enemies, or perhaps you just had a lot of fast sweeping, so this has hit the battlefield, then you've killed through some monsters and the new ones have entered poisoned. If they can't get rid of the poison, Oak Thulu is going to wreck them with that stun, and then doing decent damage. Dual Poison Siphon, if both enemies are poisoned, it can one-shot most storm monsters, so that's actually really decent damage. And it's about the disruption and the support and the reasonable tanking. Put that package together and it works out really well, that then when you just tack on a bit of like decent damage, doesn't have to be crazy damage, it ends up as a really, really strong monster. It's not for every team, but where you can use this, like that kind of niche where it really fits in, it does very, very well. At number 4, we have Dracarosa. Now, Dracarosa used to be one of the top monsters for PvP, I would say. It's fallen out of favour a little bit because these days we kind of expect sweepers to rely less on the killer weaknesses. But even so, this still does a great job because Counter-Strike, obviously, fire monsters, it doesn't matter if they have a killer weakness or not, they're fire, they die to Counter-Strike. So what this does really nicely is it has the good damage moves at efficient seconds cost, only 100 for Defang and Counter-Strike, and then also 130 for Double Bloodcrave. And then it has the fallback of Purify Mist. So if you really can't get a kill on this, and there's not much point using Defang to remove stealth shields, whatever it is, then Purify Mist is a great fallback move. It makes it a good counter for poison. That decent speed and Defang and Purify Mist. That is the kind of way to mess up poison. And then it's a good sweeper in the fact that it has stun immunity and hold ground. So if you do get sweeping with it, it's a great sweeper with Purify Mist to fall back on. And otherwise, it's always going to do reasonably well. You can't slam this at the front of a team and expect it to be a crazy sweeper. It's not reliable enough for that, but it does do a brilliant job, and it's definitely worthy of this top 4 spot. At number 3, we have Scorpiogeist. Now this one is more commonly used. It is one of the top poison sweepers in the game. It's pretty crazy. I'm glad that they nerfed it after it first came out. When it first came out, I was like, this needs to be nerfed. It's so strong. Used to be 80% speed, used to poison itself when it entered, so it had the Toxic Strike set up, and it was basically then immune to sleep as well as stun. So yeah, anyway, it sweeps very nicely. It's generally used at the back of a team with a toxic entrance behind it or in front of it or whatever, so that then everything's poisoned and it can roar Poison Massacre, because that's a much faster move, and with its high attack it can one-shot a lot of things, not everything, but most things. And then if you're going to hit any stun, then it doesn't matter that the double poison eater is 200 seconds, because you get the extra turn anyway. So you can just sweep in really nice ways with this, and even if they do get rid of the poison, Toxic Strike one-shots, and it doesn't look great there at 160 seconds, but actually that's alright for like a guaranteed one-shot move when it's poisoned, and it doesn't remove the poison from itself, so it can repeatedly use it, which again, it hits stun, it can keep doing that. So quite a crazy sweeper. It's just very easy to kill. So you want to use this with the setup of poison the enemies to get the maximum value. Just, it gets a turn, it starts killing things, and then it's going to die off at some point, and you're just going to accept, it did as much as it could while it was alive. That's the kind of thing that you want to get out of this monster. And number 2, we have Garden Fairy Sunflower. This was in the top 10 for my top 10 legendaries for PvP, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. Basically, it's just really hard to kill off because of the Hardman Carapace, and if you don't touch it enough, if you don't try and kill it enough, then the Dual Confident Strike will wreck you, the Vigor Slayer Break can wreck you too. It works with the other Garden Fairies to heal each other, which, with the Hardened Carapace makes this very hard to kill off. And if you don't kill it, if you kill other things, well then you get punished, because you get Bronze Shells. It's the kind of monster that is getting overused right now. It's just getting slammed into teams because it's so blooming good. It gets kills, it's hard to kill, and punishes the enemy team dramatically if they don't kill it. So yeah, generically good. It's up there as one of the best monsters for PvP. I'm not going to say much more about it. So now we go to the honourable mentions. There aren't going to be many in this video in general, just because I've got to try and cut down the time a bit. The honourable mention is Canis Shogun. So this is up there in PvP. Didn't quite make this top 5, and it's definitely a good sweeper to throw in there. What makes this really strong is the piercing. So when it's with a 0 to 4 star monster, it suddenly gains piercing on its moves, which Piercing Retribution is great. Piercing Bloodthirst doesn't kill after 1 kill, but like it's still better than a non-piercing Bloodthirst. So it's an efficient killer, efficient sweeper with stun converter that also can have excessive force quite easily. In certain ways when you build around it. It creates the Goldoid itself that can give it the piercing, and otherwise be awkward for like the opponent to then kill Canis Shogun. A lot of people use Canis Shogun with like Disikian, so those Goldoids enter shielded and they're a nightmare to finish off, to kill off, and then killing the Disikian, and the whole time Canis Shogun sweeping. So it's a decent stun converter sweeper. I just don't think it quite met the top 5 because they have some really powerful game-winning type stuff in here, whereas this is just like a good sweeper. At number 1, we have Tricranium. So if you watch my top 10 for PvP, I hope you watched that before watching this actually, because kind of spoilers in this video. Yeah, this is higher than Garden Fairy Sunflower. I think it's just really powerful because, similar to Garden Fairy Sunflower, it's tanky. It shields itself regularly. What you really want to do with this is like have rocks at the back of the team, stuff you're going to sacrifice, and then you keep reloading and then either killing 2 enemies, or if you don't need to kill something at that moment, then you create 2 more rocks and shield it again, reloading it. It's just very hard to kill in that way, and then having the Blessing Mortar for the instances that it's useful to heal, purify, and shield your team, that can be really powerful too. And obviously it's a stun immune thing. It doesn't one-shot everything, but it one-shots enough that it just works really well as a sweeper, while being difficult to deal with. Before we go into fire, there's one more monster to talk about, which is Pidiegon. This can be earth or fire, you just choose the one you want. So that's why I kind of put it here. It would definitely have reached the top 5 in either list. It's a crazily good monster. So the restriction of it is it has to be used in a link team. But if you use it in a link team, it's very strong. It works a little bit better in Link Earth, maybe, because the big move here that you need to be using is Link Catapult. Link Poison Eater, the damage on it is not great, but Link Catapult easily one-shots, so you need stuff at the back of your team to sacrifice, and then it can one-shot things at 100 seconds, which is like really easy, really good. That piercing kills, and then after it's got a couple of them, it can Link Bloodthirst. So this is a really, really good sweeper. Double Kinslayer as well to fall back on. That's also a good damage move. So yeah, really good sweeping. It's tanky. It has no killer weaknesses. This is a seriously good monster to put in a team, and then it also works as stun protection. Bear in mind, you can't stun so easily yourself because it halves stun for the stun on the enemies as well. But you just build around that. You don't use stun when you use Pitagon, and then it's just a bit of stun protection for your team. I'd say it's stronger than Stun Absorber, but it's it's nowhere near Stun Counter, but it doesn't have any Chrono Killer weakness anyway. So yeah, very, very strong monster. This is probably, if you make a Link Earth or Link Fire team and you put this in it, it's probably the strongest monster in your team. It's, yeah, really, really powerful. I'd like to see more of it getting used, to be honest. So before we go to the fire monsters, there's a few things I want to mention. First off is the Poison Moth. So the Pupipas are not particularly viable for top level PvP. They're just a bit too slow, but if you can pull them off, either because there's like some special rule that makes it kind of easier to pull off because the power level's been lowered, or you build around it with like say Aetherian doing Time Warp, or you just somehow manage to pull it off anyway. I mean, sometimes in battles you actually get a bit kind of locked out where neither one of you has too much damage potential, or they're having to deal with other things that you can actually pass enough time on your Pupipa. And Poison Moth is by far the best one of the moths. Since they became mythic, they got the faster moveset, they got the the +9 bonus, so the double Poison Eater being like 110 seconds or whatever it is seriously good. And since they got the stats boost, it means that Poison Moth actually survives a little bit better, and the Poison Massacre can actually kill a lot better. So Poison Moth is a crazily good sweeper. The fact it sets itself up when it first enters, it can kill 4 monsters or 2 monsters instantly, and then it's doing efficient killing while not being particularly easy to kill, and also, if I can think for a second, and also it has the stun, sleep, and poison immunity. So yeah, if you can pull it off, really, really good monster. I just wasn't going to put it in this top 5. I just think it's worth mentioning for, if you're not like top competitive stuff, or you're considering the moths in the shop, Poison Moth is a great moth to go for. So as for the monsters which we're going to look at in this top 5, most of the top fire monsters are actually Link monsters, which for that reason, there aren't any in S Plus in the tier list, because I factor in Link as like, it's a team building restriction, so it kind of, generally speaking, you're going to have to lower the power level of your team to build around that, to fit the monster in. So for that reason I push them down a little bit in the tier list. So there's a bunch of S tier fire monsters, and I don't particularly want to look at just the Link monsters. So I've actually taken out one of them, just so we can look at some of the more generic ones, rather than just talking about all the Link ones. And if you ever wondered why there's a lot of Link Fire that gets used in PvP, like right now it's one of the most popular endgames is Link Fire. I think the main reason is that the top fire monsters are Link monsters, and they are very strong when used together, along with, a few other fire monsters like Flarevern, that people end up building around it. And I like that, having these archetypes, but it is kind of like one of the few which like people really gravitate towards. But anyway, that's it. Let's actually start talking about the monsters. So at number 5 for fire, we have Catmander. Now this is what I'm talking about generic monsters. This is a really good sweeper. It got a lot of hate when it first came out, and it slowly crept up in people's ratings, I think. Catmander is very strong. The thing about it is it's just so fast to get charged that you can't ignore it. A lot of monsters, they do their thing right from the beginning, or you can kind of be like, okay, do they work in this scenario? No, actually they're not going to do that much. I can kind of leave it alone. Catmander, you can leave it alone for about 100 seconds, and then it's just going to like start killing your team. So there's a very small window of opportunity for the opponent to leave it alone, and during that time it can do Light Bane and Dark Bane, which those combined, often finds a target. Nika Punch is great for countering stealth, shields, hold ground, all that stuff. And then obviously it does a bit of the charging, and then it's Nika finisher, and it can just keep sweeping things. Yeah, bear in mind the 70 seconds you're reading there, it's then potted, so it can be down to 59 seconds, and also accelerates itself, so they're all like 50 seconds basically. So that's why I say it takes about 100 seconds. In reality, it gets a turn in like 30 seconds. Nika Punch is 20, plus the other 250. We're looking about 150 seconds, but like, you know, generally speaking, that's very fast, and it does stuff in the meantime. So yeah, this is a really cool sweeper. I love seeing it in the front line. I've used it in the front line lots, and some people really go for that. Great with the Insomnia there for countering one-on-one and that kind of stuff. Yeah, just really good generic sweeper. It's a lot of fun to play with. At number 4, we have our first Link monster of this, which is Asterios. So Asterios, what this really does for Link teams is this is a counter, a really hard counter to sleep. It's a bit slow speed, but it is relatively, well, I say relatively, it's pretty tanky, and it's got hold ground with the Purify, and it can't be put to sleep itself. So just spamming that Purify when they're trying to sleep stuff, they can't sleep it. Basically, they just can't sleep your team. So this is a really hard counter to any sleep stuff going on. And then the Swift Fast Strike on the secret skill, which isn't Link, that's a guaranteed kill. It just does crazy damage. So yeah, basically counter sleep, grabs a kill, and is all very efficient killing as well. And then it can just do Link Blood Bite. This isn't like the most crazy powerful monster, but it's definitely a very useful tool for Link Fire. That I know a lot of people who run Link Fire didn't run this initially, and then they started using it, and it's been quite common in those Link Fire setups. At number 3, we have Mantiferno. Now this is the other generic fire monster. Unfortunately, all the others are going to be Link. This is a fairly recent addition, and I haven't seen it used that much, but I've used it a fair bit, and it is crazily powerful. It's S- in PvP, mainly because of the low speed and the low defense. It kind of gets held back a bit because it is fairly easy to kill off. But what you're looking at here is a seriously good sweeper. It does a lot of raw sweeping that's great. So the important thing to note is that when it enters, it accelerates itself. So very similar to Catmander, the seconds costs on all the moves are a lot faster than you think. That raw mark is, if it got a +9 when it enters, it's 35 seconds. So it's a 35 second mark that then you can raw corner swipe. That's 91 seconds, I believe. So it can piercing raw kill every 120 seconds. And then also it's got the Blood Fury, which is, again, well, when I say 120, that's it at +9. But then Blood Fury can be 90 seconds. The Man-Eater is 70 seconds, which is piercing kill humanoid, which, if you didn't realise, all the waifu, like all the mythics that we're getting, like almost all of them right now are those, you know, stupid booby girls, and Man-Eater piercing one-shots them. So this is like the anti-waifu monster that also does like raw piercing sweeping, and yeah, it's crazily good. I love this actually more in PvE than PvP, because what you can do is you have your kind of setup going on, your sweepers and stuff, and then you have this just behind, so then you get all their Blood Fury and stuff going on, then Mantiferno enters, and then suddenly your whole battlefield has gone from like being set up and good to go into crazily good for winning a battle. I don't know if you can really do that in PvP so much, because you don't have quite so much control, but it may be possible to build around in a similar way, where you use Mantiferno in there, it comes in and accelerates what you have going on, and just makes it a lot more effective. Also, it's halved stun immune, you know, it's immune to poison, half immune to stun, which makes it a more effective sweeper. So really good sweeper that supports your team very nicely. At number 2, we've got Infernicorn, so another Link monster here. This one doesn't have to be used in Link, it's just better in Link. It's very low, you'll see, in the PvE tier list. That's because it doesn't really work there, other than for the Link. If you can get Link Fire going in PvE, this actually works very nicely. I just wanted to comment on that because it is C tier there, and it would be a lot better, you know, if you build around it properly. So what this monster really does well is that it has shield entrance, so it's quite hard to actually kill off before it does its thing. And its thing is it does the attack boost, which it needs in order to one-shot things, and then it does double piercing blow, and piercing kills 2 things. If there's any stun going on, it then can get another turn, can do it again, it kill 4 things. That is just really good value. When I first saw this monster, I was down on it for quite a long time, and I'm still not like super happy about it. Like, I've got this monster, I've used it a bit. It works great, it doesn't always work well. It gets hard countered by poison because that shield is like the critical thing for keeping it alive just long enough in order to do its attack. But anyway, I'm being down on it. It's a very powerful monster. The point is you can use it in generic teams and do the piercing moves and kill often 4 things with it. If you have it in linked fire, it has the linked blood bite, which is a stupidly fast piercing move. Sorry, not piercing move. Blood move that also heals it, so you can kind of recover some of that HP you lost from the double piercing blow. Most people just use it for the double piercing blow, though. To be honest, even in the linked fire, it's kind of like when they get the option of piercing killing 2 enemies, they take it. It doesn't work amazingly well against mythics. I just want to say that because I think in the long run this will lower in power level a little bit just because of that, that you can't really kill mythics off too easily. But yeah, definitely very powerful monster. Stun Converter Sweeper that does the job really nicely in PvP. So before number 1, we're going to look at some honourable mentions. Shiva Dragon, I talked about this lots in the last video that I made, the top 10 PvE monsters, because it's one of the best there. That's the reason why I'm mentioning it here. It is amazing in PvE, it's just not so great for PvP. It's got Crescendo that just works well in PvE, where you can really build that up, and then you can keep your team alive with the HP sharing very nicely. Honourable mention number 2 is Kamiworm. This is specifically Shiny Kamiworm, which is the fire one. This is the one I pulled out. Technically it should have been in the top 5, but I didn't want it to be all Link monsters. And this one, I'm slightly unsure about its tier list. I may move it down a little bit. Basically, it capitalizes on some kind of enemy killer weakness. The critical thing here is the Chrono Killer, because that's a very powerful move. It's going to one-shot very, very easily, as long as you can find a target. And then the idea is this is a fast, stun-immune monster that if you can get a kill on it, you built for Link Fire, and then you can link Blood Fury to just kill stupidly fast with it. Yeah, it's a great monster in Link Fire, without a doubt. Definitely a good sweeper there. I just wanted to talk about Mantiferno and Catmander in this top 5 list. So moving on to number 1, we have Magmarinus. This shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. This is the main reason why people build Link Fire in PvP right now. It's for Magmarinus, because it's high speed, hold ground, stun immunity, so it's really hard to stop from getting a turn. And what does it do when it gets a turn? It kills all the enemies. It's got Link Slowbane all. They just need a single kill, and this will just one-shot all the enemies, basically. Other than like the tankiest mythics, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's what it does, most of all. It will come in and do that, and then otherwise it can Finishing Snap, which is pretty nice. And if it has a kill, it can Berserk Smash to effectively Blood Fury a random enemy. It's got fast attacks. It's not like the best monster other than that Link Slowbane all, but it does reasonable stuff. And that Link Slowbane all is clearly a huge payoff for running Link Fire, and is the reason why people use these other Link Fire monsters that are, to be honest, they're the best fire monsters that just happen to also be Link. So yeah, they can put like Infernicorn, they can put like a Meteoroid in there, maybe Flare Vern, because that's a stun immune that does the job, sweeps well. Poison also going to help the Magmarinus because it gets rid of the stealth and shields and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and then you throw in Magmarinus and it gets the job done. So definitely one of the best, if not the best, Link. I was going to say Link Fire. Link Fire, obviously, but also fire monsters for PvP. So now we move on to the top 5 for Holy. So before we go into this, I want to mention how there are a lot of monsters that were in the Holy monsters that were in S+ category that I've already covered in the PvP video. Also, I covered, I think, one of them in the PvE video, so we've talked about a lot of these already, so I want to kind of rush over those ones and talk about some of the other ones. So for this reason, there's a few more honourable mentions in Holy, and yeah, we're going to skip over some of these in the top 5. So at number 5, we have Disikian. This is one that hasn't been mentioned so far. Disikian is a very popular PvP monster. The main thing about it is it shields monsters that come in on your team, which obviously benefits loads of different things. And I mentioned it earlier on when talking about Kaneshogun, how it creates those 2 Goldoids, and then they can come in shielded. And Desiccant can also cannibalize them to heal your team there. But yeah, with little protectors and stuff, extra tokens that you can create like that, it works really nicely. And otherwise, it's just going to benefit your team. It's a stun absorber that if it gets stunned, they kind of still have to kill it off because otherwise they're going to have to deal with all these shields. It gets countered by poison, so if it's been stunned and then there's auto poison, then it's basically disabled. But like, you know, most of the time it's an issue to deal with that the opponent has to deal with it. It's great support against, you know, stun, sleep, and poison because it's got the purify. Can get rid of tokens as well if they want to shove bronze shells into your team or do a rock lock with giving you rockoids that they're going to ignore. So yeah, it counters a lot of stuff. Really good support for the team. And then Survivor, if you can get to it, you know, that does reasonable stuff too. Slightly less good in PvE just because it doesn't really have damage potential, but it's still a good support monster, and we can all buy this in the shop. I would highly recommend this to new players, even if they're not going for PvP, because I think this is a very good stun protection option that we can use in PvE teams. In those earlier stages when you don't necessarily have the other better options, this is one of the best options you can pick up. Going on to number 4, this is a monster which we talked about in the PvE video, Garden Fairy Jasmine. I think it's one of the best stun protection options in the game because it just has amazing damage potential too. Slightly less good in PvP, but still very, very powerful. It's one of those monsters that can be stunned and then ignored because it doesn't do a whole lot. It only supports the Garden Fairies there, heating them up. But, you know, that's like one downside of it. You just need to use it with something that can give turn to it, to be honest, and then it works well. So it's got this really fast stealth all move that can be really useful. And otherwise, it can piercing one-shot anything with Vehicle Fast Break. So, yeah, and it's like stupidly tanky. Basically, the tankiest any legendary can be. So yeah, very tanky stun protection that can also kill things and stealth your team. Definitely, you know, one of the top holy monsters for PvE and PvP. If you want to see more, then go check out that previous video where talked about it in a little bit more detail. So here we have Jaguardian. This one I haven't talked about yet. This is on the S Plus for PvP. The main good thing about this is it's like one of those reliable sweepers that can also have some synergy with other things. So Stealth Bane does incredible damage. Double Retribution is the kind of fallback move that is very reliable because things on your team are going to die, and then that Double Retribution does enough damage to kill most enemies that you can then get a kill on this, and otherwise just be trading back and forth, and then you've got the Solar Blood Fury to keep killing. So decent sweeper in that regard. It's got stun immunity, so it doesn't need the stun protection support that some other monsters do. And then the cool thing about it is that synergy with Haze. So you can use this with other Stealth Bane monsters. You can use it with like maybe sneak attack monsters. There's a bunch of different stuff you can set up with this. It's clearly meant for itself. Originally Haze was a 50-second move, but that's been nerfed, and I think quite rightly. It's the setup for the rest of your team, and then it can also benefit a bit from it. But otherwise just good all-round sweeper. This is one of those monsters that you look at and it's like, yeah, I can see why this is one of like the top most used sweepers in PvP, because it does that stuff reliably, and you can even build around it a little bit. Last Wish as well, don't sleep on that. That's actually quite annoying to deal with in some instances, where you've like chipped down a monster and then it's like, oh, but I kind of want to kill the Jaguardian, and then that's going to heal up that monster again. And yeah, healing stuff can really come into play when it's on a passive. So number 2, we have Moku. I've talked about this in the PvP video, so I'm not going to talk about it here. The main thing about it is it's an endgame monster that's like really tanky, and you can then use a secret skill to pierce and kill the enemies. Very similar to what we saw with Magmarinus, but this doesn't have to be built around in the Link Fire way. This can be in anything, basically. And it can also do some other stuff like effectively having a back bite, which is kind of a faster back bite, and yeah, other stuff like that. So we're not going to talk about it here. If you want to see more about it, then go check out that previous video. So now we move into the honourable mentions, where I'm going to talk about some monsters that we haven't looked at yet. First up is Regalian. So Regalian is a lovely monster. I really, really enjoy this, and I wish more people would use it. Well, I say enjoy it. It's kind of like a shutting down enemy thing, so sometimes it can feel really horrible to face. But yeah, anyway, the 2 passives counter a lot of stuff, as I just mentioned, and what's really nice about this is it has quite decent speed, with good defense and no killer weaknesses. So in the front line, this is actually quite difficult to deal with before it gets a turn, and then it can seal something to push an enemy out of play. It doesn't matter about stun protection at all, you can just push that enemy out of play, and then it has time freeze, or bear in mind it has the passive time freeze, so they can't give turn to that monster that's out of play. So it properly locks out an enemy of your choice with seal. If you don't need to do that, you can Swift Accelerate Team, which is obviously a very nice thing to support your team, and then the seal becomes a bit more kind of like efficient with the seconds cost of it as well. And yeah, then you've built around this, bearing in mind the gravity field and the time freeze, and then it can just kind of shield itself. So you've taken like the one problem enemy, you've maybe accelerated your team, you keep this alive with the shielding, and then you're able to later on kill things with a double drain survivor. This is not like something that you just slam in a team. You very much have to build around this, but it has very powerful effects that can work very well in the teams when you've really got a good team going on. Next one we'll mention is Dolpharial. So this is a little bit lower in the PvP tier list, but I really want to mention this because I think this is the kind of monster that does a lot more than you'd think. It's kind of similar to Regalian, in that it's kind of this like weird support kind of monster, but it's very, very tanky. It's got maximum defense, also near maximum HP because its speed is low, and it's got shield entrance, and that shield doesn't get countered by poison because it's poison immune. So it's very hard to kill off before it gets a turn. And then it's got this kind of kill move with Last Mercy, where you give turn to that thing, and then if it can't kill the Dolpharial, then it dies. And given what I just said, it's very hard to kill off the Dolpharial, so it often equates to killing an enemy, but you give them an extra turn. Not so great in PvP for that, but what I really like about it is that is one of the options, and then it's got these two other options of pushing an enemy back by 100 seconds, which, similar to the Regalian that we just talked about, doesn't care about stun protection, it just pushes that thing back by 100 seconds. And then you've also got to pull a teammate forwards by 100 seconds, which is similar to give turn, but actually I don't know if it works with time freeze, I'm not entirely sure. I would assume it does actually, think about the wording, but I'd have to check that. Basically it's like a weaker give turn, but on top of everything else here, those three options, one of them will come up very nicely and you kind of use the one that's optimum for the scenario. Double Dark Bane, also brilliant damage move if there's any shadow enemies, very efficient and very powerful. And then also you've got the Revival Ritual, which revives something at efficient seconds. You just need to sacrifice something at the back of your team. This whole package, it's quite overwhelming to really kind of take in, but you've got a lot of different interesting options there on a very, very tanky monster that I think there's a lot going on here, and it should probably be tried out a bit more and utilised, because I think it can be quite powerful. You just don't want to use it with like a bunch of other support stuff, because then it's going to get stuck feeling like it's not doing that much. Lastly, for the honourable mentions, we have Noltron. This is kind of just, a stun converter sweeper. It's actually only got one passive, so it may be buffed in the future with a second passive. So it can be looked as a stun immune sweeper, but what this really does is actually a lot of kind of interesting control. It counters rocks and tokens with the execute, but really what you're looking at here is the repulse and the stun pulse. Having this options on a really high speed monster is actually brilliant. You can really disrupt the enemy team, or kind of create a scenario like people use this with, I don't know, Ryzen or something else with Time Strike Double, and then you can stun pulse with this and then Time Strike Double, or maybe use this with something else that stun pulses, and then you can like stun something and Time Strike Double with Noltron, or decide to, they have stun protection, I'm going to skip, I'm going to repulse their stun protection, then I'll stun, and then I'll Time Strike Double with Noltron. Like that kind of play pattern is what generally happens with Noltron, and why it ends up being really good is it gives you those options a little bit more than it looks like, and that with then the stun converter sweeping works out pretty nicely. Raw Bloodthirst also on this monster is like times 1.5 or more. It's actually really, really powerful, so even with just one kill it can kill shadow monsters quite nicely, and otherwise do a lot more damage than you'd think with just one kill. Execute works really nicely for whole ground monsters, so you can grab kills there. Notron generally works out really well. It's not like the most crazy monster in the game, but I think it's a decent monster that's very interesting in not just being a stun converter sweeper. And lastly, what we have is Angel Lion. So if you've seen my video before, it's actually been in both my videos. It's one of the top monsters in the game, without a doubt. It just does a lot. It's a great stun counter sweeper, so it gives you the really good stun protection from your team. It protects you in a number of ways. It's got soul exchange stuff you can do, and otherwise just sweeps with Retribution and Raw Blood Fury. So it does the job. It's a very good monster. I'm not going to talk about it much more here because this video is already very long. But I hope you enjoyed this video, taking a look at some of the top monsters in Earth, Fire and Holy, some of the ones which didn't quite make those top 10 lists before. And once again, this focus was on PvP. There are some monsters which I would have liked to talk about that are good in PvE, but I did slip a couple of them in here. But yeah, I'm going to come out with another video relatively soon, looking at the top 5 in Shadow, Shadow, Storm and Water. That'll be coming out at some point. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in a video soon.